The RF lenses are dang expensive. Like, good lenses are expensive, but the Canon RF lenses just bring it to a whole nother level. Hi, I'm Anthony. I do both photography and outdoor related content. I've been shooting with the R6 for a little bit over a year now. I did a video a few weeks ago talking about some of the things I love about the R6 and some of the problems that I have. That video was highly video centric, but I also did talk about photography. And so this video is gonna be a continuation of that. If you haven't seen it, there'll be a link up here or in the description. You can go check it out. But today I wanna talk about the RF lenses that I've purchased, kind of the order that I purchased them in, and my thought process behind how I like to use them, and also some of the cheaper alternatives if you're thinking about getting into the RF system, whether that's buying an R6 like I have or getting an RP. So I'll walk you through that and talk about some of the things that I like and that I don't like, hopefully to ease your level of fear if you see those $3,000 lenses and think, oh my gosh, like, do I have to buy that lens? So let's jump right in. First off, let's cover the obvious question. Why RF lenses and not EF lenses? There are a huge amount of EF lenses that already exist in the market, both Canon made and third party, whether that's Sigma, Tamron, or some other brand. For me, when I first started looking at the system, I was looking at it from the perspective of, I shot with a 60D. So that's the EFS line, which is their crop sensor camera. So jumping from that crop sensor camera to a full frame camera, one of the things I really wanted to do was get dedicated lenses. One of the things I really love about the R lenses is the fact that they have that third control ring that's programmable. You can use it to control aperture or ISO or a couple other settings on your camera, and I thought that offered some really unique potential moving forward into the future of lens systems. Now, one of the things I absolutely did not want was to use an adapter. I do a lot of swapping of lenses, and so to have to switch from, say, like an EF lens with an adapter to an RF lens with no adapter, that's just something else I have to manage. Because I didn't have a lot of those nice lenses, I was okay selling off my old lenses in order to upgrade. Now, a reason you might not want to do that is because a lot of other camera brands, such as Blackmagic or Red cameras, if you're doing video, still rely on EF lenses. Those lenses are great optical quality, and so there's still a huge market for those cameras, whether you're an independent video maker or someone who does a lot more video than you do photo. So let's jump right in and talk about the lenses. There are 3 of them over there and one attached to the camera. I'm gonna walk through them in chronological order. When I purchased my camera a little over a year ago, the very first lens that I bought at the same time that I bought my R6 was this 24-105. This is a great option if you're only gonna buy one lens. Previously, on my last camera system, I was shooting with a 17-55 f2.8. The one thing I really liked about it was that it was a constant aperture lens. Now, this lens is arguably one of the best lenses you can get for the Rebel line of cameras, and so I was really happy with it as an all-purpose walk-around lens. When I purchased the 24-105, I had the same thought process in mind. Now, it is an f4 lens, so you won't quite get as much out of focus background as you would with something like an f2.8, but because there is no cheaper f4 version of the 24-70mm lens, this was really the only option I had at the time. And to be honest, I shot with just this lens for about 4 months and shot everything from landscapes to portraits to whatever I had interest in at the time, and really I didn't find it limiting at all. Now, in terms of maybe where this lens lacks in comparison to going with something like the 24-70 f2.8, is the optical quality. There is a noticeable amount of chromatic aberration if you're pixel peeping, especially if you're gonna get a higher resolution camera like the R5. You're gonna notice that chromatic aberration around the edges of trees or plants, or where there's big differences in brightness contrast. Also, barrel and lens vignetting. So that's something you can very easily solve within Lightroom, but if you're someone who does video, you might struggle a little bit with getting rid of that. So for photography, for someone who's maybe mid-tier photographer to upper tier photographer, this lens is absolutely great. If you're someone who's just doing video, you'll probably be better off optically going with a cheaper prime lens or maybe even an EF lens adapted to the RF system. All right, let's talk about the next lens. Previously, I had owned the Nifty 50 EF 50mm lens. It's the little cheap guy. It's essentially the exact same lens as this. The 50mm f1.8 STM lens for the RF system makes some improvements in terms of the build quality of it, and also the ring on the end of it can be switched from focus to being a control ring. Like you can control ISO or aperture or whatever you want with this little ring. So it's, you know, a technologically smarter lens, and I don't think it makes sense, like if you have the EF version of this, to then take the cheaper lens and put an adapter. At that point, you might as well just go straight for this lens. It's relatively inexpensive and makes a great addition to your kit if you're someone who has the 24-105 and wants a backup lens, maybe for doing portraits. I've shot portraits on this. I've shot some detail photos whenever I need something that is a really shallow depth of field. And so I've really enjoyed shooting with this lens. Now, I ordered it when it first came out and there was a little bit of a back order, so I didn't get it for a few months. And in that time, I actually purchased the next lens on my list, which is the most expensive lens out of all the RF lenses that I own. This is the big boy, the RF 70-200 f2.8 lens. This is probably one of the nicest lenses, not only for the Canon system, but in terms of 70-200mm lenses in general. This one is just incredible. One, I love the size of it. Compared to the previous generation EF lenses, this is extremely compact. Now, the one thing about all of the EF lenses that you probably know is they do telescope out, but the advantage is that if you're traveling with kit, that's gonna take up way less space than a fixed non-telescoping lens like some of the older EF lenses. I purchased this lens because it kind of extends my range of what I was shooting with previously. Maxing out at 104 was kind of the limit of where I was with this lens, and I started wanting to do more detailed photography. You can shoot really nice portraits at 70mm. In fact, 70mm is one of my favorite focal lengths. And just having the lens also to extend it to 200 means I can take it and do even a little bit of wildlife photography. This lens replaced an old EF lens that I had that was a 70-300 Tamron UVD X, I don't know, some crazy acronyms. It was a sub $1,000 lens, kind of okay optical quality. Again, what I was shooting with at the time, I wasn't super serious into telephoto, so I made the justification to myself, well, if I get a nicer lens, I'll use it more often. And I'll be completely honest, it is probably one of my favorite lenses to shoot with, especially with the f2.8. Your ability to isolate a subject from the background, even when zoomed in all the way, get like plant photos or really close details of leaves. Now, it's not a macro lens, but it does come in handy if you're out shooting, you're hiking. You can take photos of landscapes, but then also zoom in and get some details when you really want to. One thing that I didn't have available to me when I purchased this lens was the fact that there is now an f4 version of this lens. The f4 version is a lot lighter, it's a lot shorter. It's kind of filling a void now that if you want a cheaper 70-200, you can go with the f4 version of it. But honestly, for me, is if that lens was available when I purchased this lens, I think I still would go with the f2.8 version. Now, one of the things that I was debating when I purchased this lens was, okay, do I want a telephoto lens next, or do I want a wide angle lens? The thing for me is that 24mm available on that guy is wide enough for most applications, especially on a full frame camera. I was comfortable going with this, but a few months later, which I think ended up being the end of February, I did make the switch and bought the wide angle lens, which is what you're looking through right now. So I'm gonna switch the lens and we're gonna talk about that lens right now. Hey, I noticed you haven't hit the like button yet. You know, it's right there. It's not too hard for you to do it. you could hit the dislike button, but you haven't done that either. So go ahead, hit that like button. It helps me out a ton. It tells YouTube that you thought this video was worth watching, so it recommends it to other people. I'll sit, I'll wait. I got my fuzzy microphone. Okay, back to the video. Okay, so I don't know if you noticed too much of a difference. You're now looking through the 24 to 105, set at 24 millimeters. So I don't know if there's too much of a shift or if you noticed a change in the focus, but let's talk about this lens. I absolutely love this lens. I come from a background shooting architecture photography. I went to school for architecture. The last camera I bought before this one, I bought at the beginning of university with a wide angle lens, and I did a little bit of real estate, interiors, architecture photography. And so for me, after shooting with the 70 to 200, I realized how much I really do miss a wide angle lens. This also made sense from the perspective of I'm shooting a lot of TikToks, whether I'm outside doing it or inside doing it, having a 24 millimeter focal length range makes a lot of sense. But having the option of going to 15 when I need it to do vlogging or to do stuff that's really close, that's where this lens comes in super handy. For me now, this is pretty much my everyday walk around lens. I can go out and shoot forest photography or urban landscape photography and be very comfortable having this as my only lens. If you're someone who does portrait photography, this probably isn't the lens for you. At the 35 millimeter extreme of this lens, I'm okay. That's when I'm okay to start shooting portraits. But for me, 50 millimeters and up is really where I want to live. Now, the great thing is if you're interested in the 15 to 35 focal length range, is Canon now has a cheaper f4 alternative, which is the 14 to 35, I believe. And so if you're someone who likes both a wide angle and a telephoto lens and wants both of those, you can get f4 versions of these lenses, which are both smaller and cheaper and still offer the same great RF system features that these lenses offer, but these lenses are still gonna be a tier up in terms of optical quality. If you wanna go even cheaper, there's now a dedicated 16 millimeter STM lens. That lens is essentially the same as this 50 millimeter lens. It's kind of like that pancake lens. That's a great option to throw in if you're someone who wants to do vlogs. You can get that 16 millimeter lens, throw it on a camera, and have a really small package, and that's perfect for vlogging. The RF lenses are unfortunately expensive. They're more expensive than their Sony counterparts, and there's really no third-party native solutions that work on this system so far. The next step for me is actually to complete the holy trinity of lenses, which is the 24 to 70 that I do not have. One thing I found shooting a lot more video within the last year is that I constantly am switching between the wide angle lens at around 24 millimeters to the telephoto lens at 70 millimeters. I love 70 millimeters as a portrait focal length. And I love 24 millimeters as an architecture, more urban landscape wide shot lens. I've really come to realize that the recommendation that most photographers will give you is start with a 24 to 70. And that's because if you're only gonna keep one lens attached, that lens is absolutely perfect. Whether you do buy the RF 2.8 $3,000 version or you get an EF adapted lens that's a little bit cheaper, I think that's really the place all photographers should start. So my roadmap of lenses has kind of been a little bit backwards. I mean, I got a kit lens to start, that covers all my bases, but in terms of doing this, I think a wide angle makes sense. In terms of doing hiking photography, I really like the 70 to 200 and the ability to really compress the scene, add something in front of your lens, and then also shoot something that's far away just makes for some amazing photos. I would still tell anyone, like, having that holy trinity of lenses, those three main lenses all the way from 15 millimeters to 200 millimeters makes the most sense in terms of having a versatile arsenal of lenses. Anyways, I hope this insight helps you in some way or another in terms of setting your own roadmap for what lenses you're gonna get. If you wanna know more about any of these lenses, of course, you can check all the videos on my channel have been shot with the lenses that I just showed you, including the photos that you see on Instagram. And I think that portfolio of work is a perfect testament to just the quality of images that you can get on the system. If you found this video helpful, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment if you wanna know more about any of these lenses. I'd be happy to answer your question. Spending $3,000+ on a lens is not an easy decision, but I hope it's something that doesn't keep you awake at night like it's kept me awake at night, and hopefully this video eases your fears just a little bit. Until next time, take care.